Welcome. You're listening to This Leader, the podcast. If you lead people and are seeking the transformational, high-impact secrets that will lead to greater joy and fulfillment in your work, will optimize your team performance, and will help you create a happy, highly productive workplace, then you are this leader and you're in the right place. I'm your host, Claire Laughlin, and each week my guests and I will explore the mindsets, techniques, and actionable strategies that will help you build the career, team, and organization of your dreams. Because I believe no one should have to suffer in a dysfunctional workplace. Let's get started. You believe in your people. You're committed to coaching, to development, to giving them the time to grow into their roles. But then reality hits. Maybe it's a crisis. Maybe it's just the relentless pressure to get visible results. And suddenly you're asking yourself, do I really have time to develop people, or do I just need to make the call right now? This is one of the hardest tensions in leadership, right? It's being forward-focused and people-centered while also being accountable for immediate outcomes. Well, today, you're going to meet a leader who's mastered both. One who builds culture with patience and makes tough decisions with clarity when the stakes are the highest. My guest today is Fran Robustelli, City Manager of St. Pete Beach, Florida, a leader who spent her career demonstrating that developing people and driving results are not competing priorities, but are intricately woven together. When I first met Fran, we worked on an innovative project that really balanced both. She was leading her organization through a complete performance management reset, methodically and systematically moving away from the traditional annual performance review to a forward-looking quarterly coaching model that focused on creating clarity in the organization and empowering people to achieve meaningful goals. Together, we built a coaching framework and we trained all her organization's leaders. I've since refined that model and used it to train hundreds of managers across many organizations, proving the power of providing real support while demanding excellence. But that's not all. Fran is going to tell the story of a recent experience where her leadership was truly tested. Just a few months into her new role as a city manager in a brand new city, she faced two back-to-back hurricanes that devastated her community. This crisis revealed something else extraordinary about her leadership. Her ability to be both patient and decisive, both developmental and accountable exactly when it mattered most. So today we're exploring how crisis reveals talent, why simple frameworks matter much more than complexity, and how authentic, forward-focused leadership builds organizations that can handle anything. So let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Fran Robustelli. Hey, Fran, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for joining me. I am so excited for our conversation today. You and I go way back, and you are the city manager at St. Pete Beach, Florida, a place where I have to come visit. You just told me, how's the weather there today?
Yes, it's about 80 degrees on January 8th, so it doesn't get much better than that.
A great day for a beach walk.
Yeah.
And so you're at St. Pete Beach now, but we met here in Northern California years ago. And I know that when you started your role as city manager at St. Pete Beach, you had a very short window of jumping in and getting started before the Hurricane Helene hit your shores.
Yes.
So tell me about your launch into this role. How was that for you?
It was exciting. I definitely was excited to come to this side of the United States. I was born and raised in Florida, and I had been hired by the commission to really focus on organizational health and employee morale, and that's my wheelhouse. So I was thinking easy peasy, we'll be fine. And we did have Helene come in shortly after my arrival. And while I had spent my entire career in California doing emergency preparedness, I'd say California is the leading state in the nation on emergency preparedness. I definitely was not ready for the level of the disaster the community had experienced. And essentially the city was shut down overnight with 90% of the structures flooded and uninhabitable.
Wow.
So it was trial by fire for sure.
Because you're an island, right?
So we're a barrier island right outside of St. Petersburg, Florida.
Okay, got it. Wow. So 90% of the structures being flooded, the entire community shuts down. What's your role? What happens in your role at that moment?
So we had already put together our emergency operations center. And as city manager, you are the head of that operations center. And they had known what to do, which was in the past because there's many mishits on hurricanes, and so for the last 50 plus years, that's exactly what happened in the city. And, funny story, I was a new city manager when I got here. They shore up the EOC the night before. We spent a whole week getting ready for the hurricane. And
Right.
then the night before the hurricane hits, they put a small team in the EOC so that they're ready to respond once it passes. And at the time, the fire chief had said, you don't really need to come. This one's 100 miles off the coast. And, this is sort of a exercise we do to be ready. And I thought, well, I am a new city manager, so I should probably, take one for the team and go spend the night in the EOC with them. And it was pretty much immediate chaos when the sun came up the next morning.
Wow.
It was like a war zone on the island, and it required a regional response.
Yeah.
We had multiple island cities devastated. The county has 24 cities, so there were also cities away from the barrier islands that had been flooded.
Wow.
So we were immediately thrown into that whole emergency preparedness of be ready to respond for the first 72 hours without any help. So you're just dealing with what you have locally until the state, county, and federal governments can respond. So that was a very interesting and challenging exercise.
I'm sure it was. Okay, so I want to focus a little bit on the team that you are working with. How did that emergency situation make the talent on your team? Again, you're new to this team. You're only in a couple months at this point.
Right.
What did that show you about the people on your team in terms of their abilities, maybe some blind spots? What came up there?
So, I'd had a couple months to meet people and I had already done sort of a initial assessment on where talent might be, where there might be some areas for growth. And within that first 24 hours, it became immediately clear where the talent was going to rise and the dysfunction was going to just magnify chaos.
Wow.
And so I found myself in the first week, strong contributors were showing up in ways that they had not had the opportunity to do that. And I think they even were surprised at how they responded and what was to the table. And then, there were those who became distractions and just increased the chaos meter, as I would call it.
Right.
It was as if everyone in the organization at every level at the same time saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of the organization.
Wow.
And I've never experienced that.
Wow. So it just completely magnified, and crisis has a way of doing that, right? It magnifies the good qualities. It puts this spotlight on where trust is and where follow through is and where accountability lies and where competence is and where it's not.
Right. And I mean, what happened because of that is the leadership team and the EOC, they were more amenable to putting people in roles that in Florida, we call it blue skies. And blue skies, you would just be doing your normal role. And we were, you know, moving people into roles quickly that they had never done, but we might have known like they can pivot very quickly. They can get up, and placing them in those spots. And if we saw that it wasn't working, we were making changes very quickly. It was kind of like this instant buy in on this necessary reaction to find those who were good at what they were good at,
Yeah.
put them in those chairs. And the team did very well at pivoting and just stepping up and doing what they needed to do.
Boy, I'll tell you, it's kind of interesting because, of course, no one ever wants a crisis. Obviously, no one wants a crisis. In fact, I know now, you and I talked fairly recently, and you were telling me that after all of the impact of not just Helene, but what was the hurricane that followed Helene?
Melton came 9 days later.
That is insane. I mean, the level of devastation. And you were just saying that really that St. Pete's Beach is only halfway back to normal at this point. Anyway, the point being, no one wants a crisis, but what is the best of what a crisis has to offer? Like if you were to say, okay, there were, in hindsight, what happened in your leadership or on the team that you would say was actually accelerated your abilities or was, in some ways a positive for the way your team worked together? What happened there?
Yeah, I would say my normal style, I've worked as a leader in 5 or 6 different organizations in my career, is to really give time for people to lean in and adopt my style and expectations,
Right,
because I show up with the thought that if I resource and you're willing, you can do it.
right,
So those are the 2, willing's yours, resource is mine.
right.
And it really accelerated where I did have to make some staffing decisions much quicker than I would have. But the situation was so dire, there was no room for coaching. The coaching window had closed, and the magnitude of stress and necessary response on the organization, there could be no weak links.
Yeah,
We just weren't going to make it through it. It was one of those situations where there's no in between. You're either going to fail or you're going to be wildly successful. And I saw that even on the Barrier Islands. I've had literally city manager turnover on my 2 sister islands to the north, and they're 5 miles from me. So they experienced exactly the same thing. And to not have that super strong leadership and approach from the city while you have a community in complete and total shock,
right.
you just don't have any window for failure. And so that I did. I've never made staffing decisions that quickly in my career. It's just not my style. I don't like to do it.
Mhm.
But it was one of those times where it was just necessary to move and pivot and build the team in a different way.
Yeah.
Much quicker than I would have.
So, how has that influenced your overall leadership philosophy? Because I know you to be a leader who leans heavily on clarity, clear goals, and good support, consistent support. But, clear goals like these are the expectations. And now I'm going to give you the support and I'm going to help you make your way.
Yeah.
But this sounds like, what you're describing is a very different situation that doesn't lend itself to that. So how has that influenced your overall philosophy? Has it?
I don't think it has. I'm sure there's a book out there about a situational leadership. I think I've read it. I don't remember the title. And it rings true. And it's whether or not a leader can actually adopt that and know that even though you're deeply embedded in a philosophy,
Right.
you may be faced with a time where you have to step away from it. And it doesn't feel good.
Right.
But to me, it wasn't about how good I'm going to feel or anybody else is going to feel. It was about how are we going to respond
Yeah.
manner that creates success for the city and the community, and just keeping that broader goal and vision.
Yeah. It's just a very short timeline. Here's the goal. It's very clear. It's crisp when an emergency. And I think there's actually, again, a bit of a gift in an urgent situation of that kind of clarity
Yeah.
that comes. Yeah, pretty amazing. So let's talk a little bit more about your secret sauce, Fran. What's your secret sauce or what's your leadership framework beyond what we've just talked about that really helps you build a healthy organization?
Yeah, I know since we've known each other for so long, I told you, I'm like, I have a formula now and I'm out now. It really works. And there's always a point in time where I think it's not going to work and it still works. So really, I kind of break it up into 3 steps. So to me, your first 60 days are a time for listening, taking in information. I take the time, and I will tell you, I've worked in organizations that are, 30 people all the way to almost 900.
Mhm.
There isn't a single organization that in my roles I have not met with the entire leadership team. So those are the directors typically
Yeah.
and the next layer of management. Because to me, the secret of an organization's success or failure on culture is going to be the mid management level.
Yes.
And so I think sometimes people miss that. as a city manager, they think, oh, I just got to get my leadership team together. But no, I spent 60 days listening and really exploring the state of affairs through their lens,
Nice.
giving them that instant opportunity to start to build trust with me.
Yeah.
I listen and take in information. And during that time, also, the key to me is to share, like, with them, what is my leadership style
Mm-hmm.
in a very simplified, clear way, expectations and the vision. And my vision for them is always focused through, like, explaining to them how important organizational culture is for me.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many people haven't experienced that in their career. And so I know that I got to set that foundation. After the 60-day mark, I actually take an effort to share what I heard,
Mm-hmm.
confirmation from the organization. So I've been out there, I've met you. This is what I heard. Did I hear you right?
Right.
That's where I repeat back the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then I know based on that confirmation that I'm ready to go to start to kind of build the tools and to attach the why I'm doing things for them. I always come in and say, let's do working genius. Not what I do. I come in, I figure out what they want to solve for. There is a pattern I've picked up over the last 30 years is that team development, where we work together to define behaviors that we want to exhibit, are going to be the secret sauce to building commitments. And I have never worked or led a team that I do not build team commitments out the gate.
Love that.
Don't do it until after that 60-day time period where they've been able to verbalize what's missing for where they'd like to be doing better. And then lastly, sort of the pattern is some type of survey to measure progress. I've chosen a very simple survey process here at the beach because we're smaller. You know, AI's come a long way. I've used some very sophisticated tools in large organizations, but I went out the gate here to really say the first survey we sent out was generally about, is the city doing well with developing teamwork, etc.? Are we doing better, worse? And then we took that and started to repeat. It's like a rinse and repeat.
So you develop the behavioral standards, which I think are so important, the agreements that you make with your team, because then you have something to bounce off, right? Once we collectively agree to these standards or these behavioral norms, then when we inadvertently violate those, have a lot of clarity around being able to say, oh, wait a minute, hang on. This is a great example of how we can accidentally go outside our norms. Let's bring us back to our true north, right? It's so powerful. And I find that a lot of leaders don't take that strong foundational step, or they take the first step, but then they kind of post them on a wall and they hope for the best. And I know it's hard because you have to kind of keep your eye on that ball and be looking both for times when the team is succeeding in implementing those expectations, but also have an eye out for the subtle moments when the team might, and like I say, inadvertently, I don't think anybody sets out to violate the norms, but it's hard to be consistent. So, how do you do that part, that kind of navigation, that course correction with your team? What's your strategy there?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple examples. One is that I'm a big believer in building a meeting cadence within your organization around people and projects. And so if it's important, it means you're communicating about it. I see
Yeah.
so many people forget they actually need to create that cadence around something that's that important. So for the culture work, our cadence really lies in we have quarterly all hands meetings.
Okay.
And that's my accountability piece. I'm presenting to them. They're giving me feedback. So they
Okay.
know that when they respond to a survey, they're heard.
Yes.
And then I'm saying, and your leadership team met about this feedback, and this is what we plan to do.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, by the way, you're going to get a quick pulse. I use pulse surveys now, I call them. They're like 1 or 2 question surveys.
Right. Perfect.
And you're going to get that. And then we're going to give those results back because we want to see if what we're doing is making a difference. And my quarterly meetings, that's my accountability deadline. So it's keeping me on track. I tell them I'm going to do it. I do it.
Yes.
And that's the key, is to finding that cadence on when you're going to communicate what the platform is and then stick to it and don't overcommit. That's why it's quarterly, because there's a lot of work around this that has to happen, even the smallest things. Like
Yeah.
we just launched an employee recognition program. Well, that might take months to develop. And then we've got to normalize it and communicate it. And so we're using those meetings to keep that going. That's the simplest
Yeah.
tactic I've used.
Yeah. I love what you're saying though, because it's simple but not easy in a sense, right?
Yes.
It's simple but not easy. It doesn't have to be super complicated once you create your standards, your norms, your programs, whatever it is. But I do think it's very useful for leaders to get kind of up above the fray and to say the big pattern here is that we need to set simple guidelines and expectations. And the magic is in reinforcement and coming back and paying attention to those things and not always throwing new things in the mix over and over and over again. As much as I love a new thing, like I love new stuff, but it's really core foundational agreements and core foundational practices that make an organization strong. People can only remember so many things, and habit formation is under the surface there, right?
Well, this time I think I get better every time I do this. I'm actually loving the way I'm rolling this out here, because we came up with 10 team commitments, and to get the buy-in from the entire organization, we had a dot voting to say, which two would you like us to measure over the next?
Oh, that's good.
One of them was support for professional development.
Okay, good.
And I love my career conversations, and I hadn't launched it yet. So, because I'm holding back tools, because you're like, if I just throw that out for no reason,
Right,
people are going to like, why is she doing this now? It's just another new fancy process. But then I could link the why to it and say, you all asked us to do this.
right.
I have this little tool in my toolbox I've been dying to roll out. And that got immediate buy in from my leadership team. And they all went and did career conversations. I'm like, you got 60 days.
Fabulous.
So that's like how now I'm having the organization drive which tool I'm going to pull out next, because they're telling me they're ready.
I love it. I think that's fantastic. And, I would say you're fortunate to be in an organization of a size that you can manage in that way. You know,
Yes. This is my favorite size organization, really. I have 150 employees, and it is the sweet spot of having that super high touch point. But I would say, when you said it's not easy, wait, it's simple, not easy. I think the difficulty is the same even up to 500, which is most organizations. So you just get really difficult when you get into the thousands.
right. You just have to really have layers of leadership that are aligned, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Like alignment becomes, your magic wand or your secret tool, really focusing on that alignment. I think that's where a lot of things do break down in a larger organization, is that you can have a lot of alignment at the executive level, for example, even at the next level down, whatever. For a lot of people, that's directors or it's managers or something like that. But then as you get closer and closer to the front lines, things degrade a little bit. And it's not anybody's fault. It's literally just there's a lot of people here, and we need that skill of alignment and consistent communication top to bottom. And that's hard to focus on sometimes. And there's a lot of other things going on, right? Let's talk a little bit about some of your universal wisdom, Fran. Like we've said, you and I have known each other for many years, and I admire your leadership so much. We've done a lot of really fascinating, innovative projects together over the years. And what I'd like to ask you is, what are you building, or what would you share? What kind of transformational or high impact secrets and strategies would you share with other leaders who want to have a big positive impact and build high trust and high performing organizations? What are some of your gems that you'd love to have people take away?
Gosh, that's a tough question. Again, I think I go back to the simple but hard, and it's really worked for me. I think, 99% of the people that have worked with me or for me would say there's a level of authenticity.
Yes.
And to me, that comes with some very simple but time consuming tools of, one, just being present, and two, being vulnerable. And I'm not one of these, you hear these leaders and they say, oh, they keep things really close to their vest, or, no one really knows them, or they always have the polish on.
Right.
And I think you gain more trust and empathy, and it's received back when you just show up the real you. And I have been extremely vulnerable in my career. It has burned me a few times, but I've always said I've gotten so much more out of being that way that overcomes the hurt or pain from the burn.
The few times when it doesn't go as planned.
Well, that sounds so simple. And I know it's hard when you get to the top because it is lonely. You are a target, you're always the lightning rod. And I guess I'd rather be struck down being the real me than trying to, step everybody. It's just not my style. So that's what I'd say. You got to pick a place where you can show up and be you. And that's going to get the biggest outcomes of having the blessing of being in that spot.
I love that. Could I add an observation to that? I agree 100%. You show up, you are you, you're very accessible, real. You roll up your sleeves and you do the work with people. That doesn't mean that you get in everybody's business or anything like that. I've always known you to be a leader who's willing to, again, roll up your sleeves and look at what's real. Like when you say you do this listening tour, like you're not there to sit down with everyone and let me tell you about me and let me tell you about my expectations and all this. The first thing you do is you learn. You roll up your sleeves and you sit there and you say, share with me, what are your struggles? What are the challenges? How can we work together to create what we want? And the other thing that you do, I believe in, and that I think is really beneficial for leaders, is you're clear on your leadership philosophy. You're clear on what you believe about best leadership, about people's capabilities, and about how you will approach situations. And then you walk the talk.
When you taught me that,
I did.
I don't know how many times you said the word clarity, and I use it all the time. And when I see things going sideways, the first thing I'm like, do we have clear roles here? Do we know what we're doing?
Right.
What's the purpose of this meeting?
Right. Do we have a shared reality?
So I would say establishing clarity thank you. That has been the best lesson you have taught me through all of my time with you.
Oh, thank you. And again, it sounds simple, but it's not easy. It takes consistent effort. Well, thank you so much, Fran. This has been a wonderful conversation. And I know St. Pete Beach is very lucky to have you. And as you continue rebuilding and building a great community there and a great team to serve them, like I'm with you all the way.
Thank you so much.
Wow, that was an exhilarating conversation. I'll tell you, on those days when I'm facing setbacks and frustration, I just pause and I remember what the city of St. Pete Beach faced and how crisis reveals who we really are as leaders and what Fran showed us about being both patient and decisive, right? Being both developmental and highly accountable, and how when you're crystal clear about what matters most, you can make your way through the hardest situations. I am so grateful to Fran for her honesty about the hardest parts of leadership. The loneliness at the top, the courage it stays to really be authentic, and the discipline to keep building even when you're rebuilding from devastation. St. Pete Beach is lucky to have her. So, if this conversation sparks something for you, I'd love to hear how you've led the way through hard times. Connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram or drop me a note. Meanwhile, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future conversations with leaders doing the hard work of building better workplaces. Until next time, keep moving forward. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about my services and for lots of free resources and additional tools to enrich your journey, visit my website and subscribe to my newsletter at clairelaughlin.com. If you have a question about leadership, teams, or organizational culture you'd like me to address on the podcast, please reach out to me at support@clairelaughlin.com and connect with me on social channels at Claire Laughlin Consulting. Until next time, lead the way.